We're here at the SaaS Security Analyst Summit 2012 at Kaspersky Labs, and we're in Cancun, Mexico. I'm Paul Roberts, an editor at Threatpost, and I'm here with Brad Arkin, Senior Security Manager at Adobe.
That's right.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Brad gave a great presentation here yesterday on talking about kind of Adobe's process for finding patches, developing patches, and releasing them for vulnerabilities. And one of the things that you said that I thought was interesting, Brad, was that you think there really needs to be a lot more emphasis on, in the security community, on working on defenses rather than exploits for researchers. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our focus at Adobe really has two sides of the strategy. One is driving up the cost of exploits for the bad guys to develop initially. And then the second side is, once an exploit is developed, how do we compress the window where that exploit is useful and then really decrease the utility so that it's not as effective in the first place. And so something that I think really deserves a lot more attention than it's getting these days in the industry is studying existing exploit techniques that are really used in the real world, and then studying ways that we can chip away at that effectiveness and make it a lot harder. And we've seen really great real-world progress on things like this with DEP and ASLR, where exploit techniques that used to be very effective and straightforward are now much more difficult. The bad guys have to work a lot harder. The skill sets that are required are going to be much greater. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for new ideas like that to come out.
Do you see evidence just from your own data that you have been successful in raising the bar for either black hat or gray hat or white hat researchers to find exploitable vulnerabilities in Adobe's products?
Yeah, so the biggest example of that is with Adobe Reader 9, we were putting a lot of incremental changes into that product, which were making it harder to attack. But at the same time, parallel, we were working on version 10, which we released November 18th of 2010. So that's been out for 13 or 14 months now. And since its release, we've never seen a sample of any exploit that's effective against version 10. And so we took advantage of platform features like DEP and ASLR. We did a lot of code hardening work, but I think the biggest thing that we did was the introduction of Adobe Reader Protected Mode, which is the sandbox. And so this now requires multi-stage exploits, whereas in the old days you could take a crash, get control of execution, and run your code. These days in the sandbox, you're stuck in a low rights environment, and so you need to somehow get out of that environment to carry out the second stage of your attack. This linking of multiple stages of an attack has proven to be not worth the effort, and so the bad guys have moved on to other topics. Yeah, so that's a good example for us.
So in theory, exploitable, but so difficult to find a working exploit that they're going to move to targets of opportunity, sort of.
That's our guess at what's happening. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is you talked about sort of the evolution within Adobe from 2007, 8, 9 to the present day. The company's approach to fixing vulnerabilities, and you said initially it was really on, let's just find and fix bugs in the product, but pretty quickly realized that that wasn't necessarily the best investment of your engineers' time and effort.
Right. Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so some of this is my fault because I came from a consulting background, and the joke is consultants are always trying to sell more consulting time, and so finding and fixing bugs is a great effort because you're never done with that task. And so in early 2009, the entire Reader and Acrobat engineering team did a feature stand down. And so from mid-January until the end of May of 2009, the Reader team did nothing but security work. So they weren't building features, they weren't working on anything but making the code harder to attack. And one of the major streams of effort there was fuzzing and fixing flaws that we could identify. And the idea behind that was, if we can use the same techniques that the bad guys are using to find flaws, and we kind of get there first, then it'll be harder for the bad guys to find flaws and write exploits. So we wrote some of the best PDF fuzzers that have ever been written. We had this huge fuzzer grid, and we had parallelism, and we were churning out a great number of bugs, and then lots of tactics in order to figure out which ones were unique and then how to fix them very quickly. And in the end, it didn't seem to make any difference at all in how hard it was for the bad guys to find the next bug, no matter how many that we fixed. And so what we learned from that is that, well, these folks could work on code hardening, they could work on a brand new updater. There's a lot of things that actually would make a difference. And those bugs are still going to be there. We just make them harder to exploit. And in hindsight, it actually wasn't a wasted effort because it taught a large number of non-security engineers how easy it is to write exploits, how easy it is to write fuzzers. So the educational benefits of it were really high. But in terms of making the product harder to attack, in hindsight, I don't think that's what really made the difference. It was all the other stuff that we did.
Interesting, interesting. Kind of your own version of the trustworthy computing memo and the shift that Microsoft did of standing down, doing training, starting to look for vulnerabilities, but pretty quickly realizing this can't be. We're playing whack-a-mole here.
Yeah, there's more effective ways to go.
Right.
Exactly.
The other thing I really thought was interesting from your talk was just the sheer amount of person hours that go into responding to a critical, exploitable vulnerability. You mentioned that a recent one was 6,000 person hours to develop the patch and obviously test it and get it out to customers. If you're a software company out there that hasn't gone where Adobe's gone, that might sound pretty daunting, that amount of resources devoted towards security. But I guess, are there ways that companies can shrink that 6,000 hour figure down to something that's more manageable?
Yeah, definitely. And our experience here was in January '09, when we had the JBig2 bug that was being exploited in the wild. It took the entire team 8 weeks, roughly, to get that patch out the door. And that's because we didn't have an urgent response capability. And so it was much, much more than 6,000 man-hours for that. And so then we studied that experience. We said, in the new world we're in, we can't live with this anymore. And so we set up what we call a zero-day branch, which is separate from the main line of development. And then we looked for all the things that you can do in advance before you get the exploit, so that you're ready to go. And so it's, the night before you lay out all your clothes and your shoes and everything, so you can get out to the airport quick. And so we studied that, and then the things that we felt we had to do only after we received the bug. And then through experience, we looked at how we can reduce those hours. And so the first few times we did it, it took about 15 calendar days and 6,000 man hours to do it, which was a lot. But over time, we were able to chip away, and as we got better at understanding what steps can we skip without introducing risk, then we looked for ways to do that. So now, for Reader, we've got it down to about 5 to 7 calendar days and much fewer man hours. I'm not sure how many, but it's a lot less. And then for a product like Flash Player, they've got different levels of automation, and their record currently is 72 hours from when we first received the bug to when the patch goes out the door. And so, just like any engineering process, once you start studying it, you look to optimize it, you look for things that you can carve off, and as long as it's a focus, it's straightforward to compress those time frames.
Okay, well, we're in February. It's the beginning of the year. Give us a look ahead. What can we expect from Adobe security-wise in the coming year? Reader 10's out. It's holding up pretty well security-wise. So what can we expect from you guys?
So our big products that we're working on now, Reader 10 has been doing very well at defending our users. Reader 9 is older technology, not as effective. So we're looking forward to getting closer to that end-of-life phase. And the big challenge for us now is just moving more and more people off of older versions of Reader to version 10. And then we're working on the next version of Reader, which is going to have enhancements beyond what we've done in 10. So even though we've gotten some separation and breathing room, we're not giving up yet, and we're still working on new improvements. For Flash Player, we're adopting a lot of the things that have proven to work in Reader, and then also some things, because they're different products, and so there's some other things we can do. And so for Flash Player, we've got what we call a background updater, which has been in beta for a while now, and so we're looking at moving that into production. We've got a level of sandboxing in the Chrome browser, which is going to get better. And then we're looking at moving sandboxing into other browser environments. And because Flash Player is integrated so deeply into each browser, we can't just do it once. We have to do it browser by browser. And so it'll probably be Chrome first, and then Firefox, and then Netscape Plugin API next. And then we've got hundreds of products at Adobe, so we're always working on the security for those things. And then a big emphasis at Adobe now is hosted services. And so people think of Adobe with products like Photoshop and Reader and Acrobat, but we also have Omniture. We've got Photoshop.com, Acrobat.com, and a bunch of other hosted services. And so we've been doing a lot of work in that area, and we're going to continue to do more. So it's going to be a busy year.
Great, Brad. Thank you very much, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us and come down to SAS.